Next up, it's time for Movie Spotlight, our weekly segment where we review some of the latest releases, both domestic and foreign, at the Korean box office and online. And it's, of course, our film critics who will be doing that for us, so let's bring them in now. Here with me in the studio is Jason Bechervaise. Jason, hello, it's good to see you.
Hello, Jang-o. Great to be here as always on this lovely summery day.
Yes, indeed. It is turning. The weather is turning. It is a bit cooler, thankfully, finally. And we have with us as well Marc Raymond. Marc, hello. It's good to see you too.
Good to see you.
So we start with a local thriller this week starring Shin Hye-sun. The title in Korean is Target. But funny enough, it has a different name in English.
Yeah.
They went with the far more unwieldy and odd English title, Don't Buy the Seller. I'm not sure why they went with that name in English when they have a perfectly fine name in Target, but yes, in any case, it's called Don't Buy the Seller. It centres around a woman who is the victim of an online scam, but when she tries to expose him, she discovers that the scammer is a serial killer as well. So, Jason, can you tell us more?
Yeah, it's actually loosely inspired by a true story, which makes the events in the film all the more horrific.
Wow.
So yeah, it stars Shin Hye-sun. She's obviously a big name here in Korea. She was in Innocence Collectors and along with a number of television dramas. She plays an office worker. Basically, her washing machine packs in. And she looks for a new one online, well, a used one online, and she gets it installed and discovers that it doesn't work. So understandably, she's enraged, and she then goes online and leaves comments warning others of this particular scammer. Now, he seeks revenge, and he is very tech savvy, so he tracks her down. And he's also a sadistic serial killer. So he begins basically ordering everything under the sun, jjajangmyeon, Chinese food, all sorts of stuff, and just freaking her out. And ultimately her life is turned upside down. So she reports him to the police, but they're swamped with other cyber crimes. But they actually do take it seriously, but they're just unable to track him down, which I felt was a little bit of a stretch. But yeah, the killer is always one step ahead of him. It's written and directed by Park Hee-kon. He made films such as Feng Shui, Perfect Game, and Insadong Scandal.
Okay, so Mark, this is a female-led film as well. We see the story from the victim's perspective. What did you make of it? It's perhaps also grimly topical, given some of the real-life violent crimes that we see in the news here recently.
Yeah, it definitely, I think, plays differently than it would have played even a few months ago. It's actually a lot of it's quite a violent film. I don't think gratuitously violent. I think the violence is pretty effective. It's, doled out kind of in a measured way, but there's definitely some disturbing elements. I thought it was a pretty good thriller, actually. It's not a pretty conventional. The filmmaking's not great, but I think it does tap into a lot of these fears, a lot of women in Korea have around, especially the influence of online culture and these kind of cyber crimes that it seems can target women in particularly. And so, yeah, I thought when I watched the film, I was thinking of not only the more recent violent attacks we've been hearing about, but also about basically just the feminist movement in Korea over the past year. I've been reading this book, Flowers of Fire by Ha Jung, and she talks a lot about some of the cybercrime aspects and cyber harassment that goes on. So yeah, I found maybe because of those connections, the movie had a bit more resonance than the average kind of thriller, which in some ways it kind of is. Jason mentioned, there's some far-fetched kind of elements, but those go along with a lot of these kind of movies, right? Part of this genre. But I did find, and I found as towards the resolution, not to spoil anything, I found it a bit more kind of maybe grimmer or tougher minded than I was expecting. You expect maybe a bit more. I found it went a bit darker in that direction too. So yeah, I thought it was a pretty solid film. Not a masterpiece, but yeah, a pretty good example of this genre. That again, I think is helped by the fact that it does feel very kind of topical right now, and I think that adds a bit of resonance to it.
Right, so not a masterpiece, but effective.
Yeah.
Jason, what about you? This is one of several films focused on cybercrime, actually, as well. There was one by starring Chanui, the Netflix film called Unlocked, which was quite similar as well, I understand. What did you make of this one?
Yeah, so there's a few films actually. There's also Voice in 2001 featuring Byun Ho-yan and Kim Yo.
2021.
2021, that tackles voice phishing. And you mentioned Unlocked, that follows Chanui, she's on a bus and she loses her phone. And it's pretty scary what goes on online. And so this film is very much kind of part of that. You've also got Door Lock as well. Which is not about cybercrime, but it's about this woman who lives alone. And so, and in this particular film, Don't Buy the Seller or Target, she does live alone and she is very vulnerable. And it's a very, it's dark. It was a lot darker than I was expecting.
Right.
And the chain of events I found a little bit kind of, like I said earlier, a little bit contrived, put it that way. I just can't see how the police would be like 5 steps behind, throughout pretty much the whole film. And the performances are pretty good. There's this car chase which had me on the edge of my seat. It takes you in directions you don't really expect. I think it's very topical, as we mentioned. It's pretty well made. If you look at the director, he has made films such as Perfect Game, which is a very solid movie as well.
Right.
It was much better than I was expecting. Pretty decent, But I suspect that it might be a little bit too dark for some audiences. It's quite difficult to stomach. It's not explicit, it's not, it's not grotesque, but
the storyline itself, I'm guessing.
I think, as Mark mentioned, it holds resonance because we see this kind of, sadly, these kind of stories in the news, and I think, it might be quite difficult for some people to kind of digest. So, but nonetheless, it's a decent film.
On that note, Mark, what's the reaction been like so far? What has the audience reaction been like?
It's got its second in box office admissions for this week, but I got a feeling, again, as we know, there's a lot of sort of attacks, weirdly, almost with the theme of the film, online, female-led online films get these kind of anti-feminist attacks online.
Right.
So I'm not sure in terms of it's hard to really accurately judge how popular the film is, how is it resonating with audiences. I think, but I think Jason's right. I think it's a movie I can imagine a lot of female audiences being absorbed by and interested in, but also maybe it's just too dark for the moment. Like, do you really want to see a movie with, stabbings and this kind of violence at this time? It might maybe be too close in that way. But I think it is an effective film, and I think. If we kind of think of art as having this kind of cathartic kind of function, maybe it would be kind of popular.
Right.
It might gain an audience that way. Yeah.
Right, so it's falling victim to a rating bomb and something like that then.
But it is crucial that, we do see it from her perspective.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. There is a villain in the film, but it's, it's told through or from her point of view. So it is important, it is significant. But I think it's going to be it'll be tricky for it to kind of take off in a big way, because it's just as Mark said, too close to home.
Okay, so that's Don't Buy the Seller. Let's move on to our second film. It is a Hollywood release, but this one is led by an Asian American cast. It's called Joyride and has the same phonetic title in Korean, and it's an R-rated road trip comedy, a familiar Hollywood genre, but this time with an Asian American twist, led by Asian American women as well. Mark, actually, can you take it for us?
Yeah, this is directed by Adele Lim, and as you're kind of describing, it's a pretty familiar film, but what's different about it is that you have Asian American women kind of in the lead role. It's produced by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, who did the movie Superbad and have been associated with the Judd Apatow kind of comedy crew. And it definitely has some links to those kind of films, and especially the movie I thought of a lot as Bridesmaids, which is a female-led kind of gross out, over the top kind of comedy that, and this movie kind of takes that and maybe even ups it a bit. Actually,
Wow,
it is quite kind of raunchy and kind of explicit. It basically, the story is about. The plot is around the lead character, Audrey, who was adopted and raised by a white family in the United States. And she has to go to China to close a business deal. But she brings along her two closest friends, one an aspiring artist, the other an actress, along with the younger cousin of one of the friends who's a huge K-pop fan. And so that kind of enters into the plot at one point.
Right, okay.
And as often in these kind of films, there's a lot of wild kind of misadventures. You know, again, like I mentioned, there's at least two really long kind of set pieces. But there's also kind of an attempt to add a bit of emotional resonance, because again, the lead character ends up trying to find her birth mother. So there's that kind of sentimental plot kind of put in to this kind of otherwise very kind of out there kind of comedy. So yeah, so it has this kind of tonal kind of blend.
Right.
It stars Ashley Park, Sherry Cola, Sabrina Wu, and the Oscar nominee from last year's Everything Everywhere All at Once, Stephanie Chu, as the four kind of main characters.
So Jason, I'm sure you've seen many of these kind of comedies before over the years. How does this one compare?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's quite similar to other films we've seen. Bridesmaids, also Sex in the City as well. And yeah, I mean, essentially, you know, it's focusing on these Asian Americans, and it pokes fun at some of the, you know, kind of the racism that exists in the United States. But also within Asia as well, which I thought was quite fun to watch, because you know it's not just China. They go to Korea, and they're talking about, you know, the different kind of, you know, different Asian countries, and yeah, I mean, it is a familiar formula. I mean, basically it's the same thing that we've seen before. You know, Superbad, Bridesmaids. So in that sense, you know, it's not necessarily anything new, although the fact that, you know, it is focusing on Asian Americans. And would we see this film, you know, 10, 15 years ago? No. And, you know, I think it does show how things have changed in Hollywood, albeit very, very slowly. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's got the jokes work. They land really well. You know, Seth Rogen's clearly been involved, you know, in the screenplay, in the production, and it shows. But yeah, performances are great. It's got a good running time as well. You know, it's 94 minutes or something. So it doesn't feel like a slog or anything like that. It's refreshing. You know, it's certainly, it does tackle some of the issues that are very prominent today in, you know, what is a very divisive America. But I think it does it in a really, really entertaining way.
And Mark, what about you? How did you find it?
I wasn't as big a fan of it. I mean, it has like a couple of the set pieces I mentioned are quite funny, and there are definitely moments, and you know, kind of really goes over the top, and I appreciated those elements. But the overall hit rate on the comedy wasn't very high for me. Like I found a lot of it didn't work. And the sentimental subplot is very bad, I think. and it's very bad in comparison. And I mean, maybe it's not fair to compare a comedy like this, but you know, you see there's been so many really good films about this subject, like most notably Return to Seoul, which came out last year. And this is just really bad in comparison. I don't think the lead actor is very good. I really wish Ashley Park, I really wish Stephanie Chu had a bigger role. I thought she was the best of the four leads. And so, yeah, I was kind of lukewarm on it. You know, it's got its moments, and I think and it is like the fact that you have these Asian American women. Sure. You know, I think it's trying to, I think, break a lot of these kind of stereotypes and kind of allow them to have this kind of wild kind of, you know, adventure. And so I think in that way it's interesting. But yeah, I can't say I thought most of it worked. Yeah. So.
Barriers being broken, but perhaps not good enough to last longer than memory.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was Joyride. That's it for Movie Spotlight this week. Jason, Mark, thank you for your reviews, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you.